us. Tonight, members of that group, along with Soviet television and radio commentator Vladimir Posner, are ready to react. Let's join Ken Schramm now with KOMO's town meeting. Ken, how are you?
Thank you, Ted. Off the top, we've got to say that due to the marvels of modern technology, we've yet to make a connection with Vladimir Posner in the Soviet Union. We're trying to reach him by telephone. We've run into some difficulty. Hopefully, during the course of this, he'll join us in progress. We want to welcome you back to town meeting. Earlier tonight, we were kicking around the controversy surrounding the controversial program America. We are here to do that again this evening. Most of the studio audience, I would say a goodly portion of our studio audience, stayed with us for the 5 hours. They watched the final 2-hour segment of the program. Our upfront guests, John and Jeff, also stayed with us. Jeff Cohen, John Carlson. John Carlson is with the Washington Institute, which is a conservative think tank. Jeff is with the Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. Let's, if we're just going to pick up where we left off, let's try to get a little bit of a relationship to what we've just seen in the concluding episode of this whole thing. Anything that changed your mind, changed your viewpoint, or impressed you? John?
Didn't really change my mind much at all. The program seemed to run along pretty much the pace that I had expected it to. No major surprises.
Yeah, but before, one of your criticisms was that the Russian occupation forces were too nice. Those dirty commies sure got us in the end. I mean, they were right in there.
Mm-hmm. The bad guys won, sure. But in terms of the kind of brutality that we were talking about before that you would never be able to see on television, still, of course, and again, there's no surprise, it wasn't on this 2-hour segment either.
Okay, Jeff, how about you?
To me, this episode looked a little bit like a marriage between Red Dawn and Dynasty. The problem with the show is, to me, it's like a manipulative cartoon. Good guys and bad guys, white hats and black hats. And I think it was the epitome of irresponsibility when ABC begins the show by saying, join our call to arms. I mean, in the real world, if we fight the Soviets, we won't be fighting them with handguns and rifles in Nebraska. If we go to war with the Soviets, it'll be the last war that's ever fought on the planet. That's why I think this thing rings irresponsible to me.
Okay. We want to make note of the fact that we're going to be taking phone calls during this segment. We'll be with you for at least another half hour or so. Oh, you're over there. All right. It's late. What can I say? Give us a call. At this point, I want to get back to Fred Nolan because you kind of got short-sheeted there at the end of our 6 o'clock segment. Again, I'll reintroduce you as a member of the Seattle Tashkent Sister City Organization, having just returned from the Soviet Union. Your perspective on this program, what you feel it means to the Soviet people, or what it would mean to the Soviet people.
Well, Ken, one of the things that the hero talked about tonight in a very good speech about fear was the debilitating effect of fear. And it seems so clear that our two societies fear each other deeply, distrust each other deeply, come out of a 40-year history of that in an arms race that's been out of control and has left both of our countries really debilitated economically in the world as we find ourselves having a harder and harder time to compete, and the Soviets finding the same difficulty. And what is happening in Seattle is really very exciting. Seattle is a center now, partly through the Seattle-Tashkent Sister City Committee and the relationship with Tashkent, but also a whole lot of other people in Seattle, including a group I've been working with, Plowshares, a former Peace Corps volunteer group, who are really reaching out and starting to find friends in the Soviet Union, to make friends. Instead of making enemies and concentrating on enemies, we're making friends.
Let me ask you, with what you know about the Soviets, would they be shocked by this program? Would they be amused? What do you think their response would be?
Oh, I think that they would be heartened to see the outcry within the United States about this program. The Soviets know a lot more about us than we do about them, and they know about the level of our ignorance, and this show demonstrates that very clearly. I think that they would be concerned that this will whip up more fear at a time that they know that we just can't afford more fear.
John, let me ask you to respond to that. In whipping up that fear, the frenzy that is created, do you think there is any danger in that?
Once again, it was only a show. And I think that the impression that most people got of the Soviet Union was more of a realistic one about what people who are forced to live under a system like that have to go through. I don't see why Fred and many other critics here have to see something wrong with showing what people live like if they're under Soviet domination.
As a Russian, as the president of the Washington State chapter of the Congress of Russian Americans, I would like to express the Russian viewpoint on the program and the American reaction to it. Several things. Basically, the situation, as shown here, is much too mild. If there were a Soviet occupation, as our Afghan friends on the other side there stated earlier, things would be much more serious and much more frightful. People would not just walk into camps, as was shown in this last episode. Another thing is, a Soviet invasion as an invasion, from our viewpoint, is unnecessary because this society is ripe for collapse from within. As far as the third point, and this is our major point, and this is something that several people here have been guilty of today, using the word Russian interchangeably with communists or Soviets. And Ken, you did that too, unfortunately. So we would appreciate people not using ethnic terms for political viewpoints. You don't say German when you mean Nazi. You don't say Italian when you mean fascist. So please do not say Russian when you mean communist.
Point taken, and I apologize for the slip that I made. I actually thought I was being pretty careful. One slip I made. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I think it's a level of our ignorance that people talk about the Soviet Union as the Russians. I think a program like this isn't going to raise anyone's consciousness. If anything, it lowers it. I think what people in the critical community have been saying is, let's see some programming that builds bridges between people instead of programming that builds walls.
To that end, Jeff, the Discovery Channel aired live Soviet television. We've seen WTBS. Locally, we have seen an inordinate amount of programming concerning the Soviet Union. We've seen just a ton of things, printed material on this issue. Would it have all come about were it not for the controversy surrounding this program?
I don't think it would have come about, except we've put together the biggest coalition in history that's ever reacted negatively to a TV show.
Can you acknowledge then that there is at least that benefit?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I wrote an op-ed piece that went out on the wires that, in the sense, it may end up being America with a K, may end up being good for America with a C, but it's not what ABC intended. It's what the peace movement did to bring out the real debate, to generate the debate.
Well, I was born in Estonia, and of course I can relate quite well to the whole movie, to the whole series. And of course, maybe it's fiction over here, but to us it's really real. I can relate almost anything that was shown in any scene here, for example, that sort of affected either myself, my family, my people, country. And it really, I think, ultimately, the show shows what can happen if you lose your freedom. And freedom is precious. And that's what can happen. And it points that out in a powerful way. And I really want to compliment ABC for bringing this show and the attention to the people, at least even for discussion. It's a beautiful thing.
And ABC... I can assure you, ABC will take all the compliments it can get these days.
In the movie, Devon himself stated that fear conquers and divides. I mean, conquers and destroys. This movie, as people say, may be fiction, but in high school and throughout the United States, people use video and the press to teach people. This, I believe, is teaching people fear and installing in them fear which will destroy any chance for peace that we have.
All right, on that note, we've got to take a quick break. When we come back, I understand we have made the radio or the phone connection with Vladimir Posner. We will talk to him when we come back. Stay with us. Town meeting will continue. Okay, welcome back to this special edition of Town Meeting. As I said before we went away to break, we do have with us now Mr. Vladimir Posner, who is a spokesperson and a commentator in the Soviet Union. Welcome, Mr. Posner. Thank you for being with us.
It's my pleasure. I'm going to have to start arguing with you right off the bat. I am not a spokesperson for anybody. I am indeed a journalist for television and radio.
Okay, well, acquiesce. Let us begin. I understand you have not had the opportunity to see the entire program of America from beginning to end. May I ask you your concerns, if there are any, based on the premise of what America is meant to represent?
I'm sorry. Could you repeat the last part of that question? The sound is not too good.
Okay. Do you have any concerns based on the premise of America as a television program and what it signified or represented?
Yes, I have some concerns. Quite frankly, I think it starts out on the premise that the Soviet Union and the United States are enemies, and on the fact that the Soviet Union, by one way or another, has indeed conquered the United States of America. We don't know how, but we know that that's happened. So that tends to reinforce I would call it the stereotype feeling that the Russians are out to get the Americans. And in this day, I feel that kind of approach extremely dangerous. I think that to work on fears, on prejudice, on hatred in the nuclear age is a very dangerous game to play. I'm very concerned about it because instead of breaking down the barriers, in my opinion at least, this kind of movie brings them up. It reinforces them. So I am concerned, yes.
Do you think it would have any real effect on U.S.-Soviet relations? Or is this something that we're discussing in a loftier sense, that emotionally perhaps this does have its downside, but in the face of reality it's not going to have any impact?
You know, I'd like to say that no, it's not going to have any effect, but I think that when you look at it carefully, I mean, what is it that establishes relations between two countries? Ultimately, we talk about governments, but governments are made up of people, such as you and I. And if I am brought up in a certain condition with a certain view and a certain, if you wish, even knee-jerk reaction to the other side, and I come into a responsible position, my views can influence the relationship. So what I'm saying is that if America is not immediately going to influence them in the sense of, breaking off diplomatic relations or anything like that, but the fact that an entire population is being treated to this, I think, is going to influence people's way of thinking and could one day influence the relationship in a much more insidious way than is perhaps evident.
Let me ask you, has the Soviet people's impression of America been diluted, impacted, or influenced by what might be considered in this country U.S. bashing in the Soviet Union, by programming and depicting U.S. government and people in a certain way that might necessarily not reflect accurately this country?
I would absolutely have to say that you are not the only ones who are guilty. I mean, we certainly have done our share, and although we've never produced anything like America, and hopefully never will, there's no doubt that selective reporting, the bias of a journalist, for instance, when reporting a story, all of these things have led to what I would consider to be not the full picture. It's like when you show someone's face and the pimple on the face. If you show only the pimple, gradually people are going to think that that's the way the face looks, although the pimple is there to be, truly. And I think we've done a little bit of that. So where I would say that most Soviets tend to distinguish clearly between America, Americans, and a given administration, to say that we are not guilty in some ways of creating prejudice and building on it would not be true.
Okay. Mr. Posner, let me introduce you to John Carlson, who is with a conservative think tank called Washington Incorporated. His position has been, if I may paraphrase very quickly so that you know where he's coming from, has been critical of the program in that he feels it depicted the occupation forces too benevolently. Yeah. Mr. Carlson, Mr. Posner.
I think what the people here in the audience and at home have just heard is really disgraceful. In the first place, Ken, you acquiesced in something that you certainly should not have felt any obligation to acquiesce in. Mr. Posner is not a journalist, and there is no free press where he comes from. He is not a commentator. He is an official apologist for the Soviet government, and that's all there is to it. Secondly,
rather than have this degenerate into an argument as to whether or not this is an objective journalist or a spokesperson for the Soviet Union, let us get to the crux of the issue, and that is your feelings about America as opposed to what Mr. Posner has said.
Certainly. First of all, this TV miniseries was not produced or shown by our government. It was shown by a network, a free TV network. What you see in the Soviet Union is the most crass, grotesque, anti-American propaganda that couldn't air on an American affiliate or independent station because of its unprofessional tone, and it is put out by the government to harden attitudes toward the American people.
And you're saying that justifies...
I'm saying there's a clear-cut difference between a TV miniseries labeled fiction and Mr. Posner saying, well, gee, we've been known to be almost as bad as you Americans. We've had some things over here every once in a while, too. I mean, give us a break.
Mr. Posner.
Well, what am I supposed to say? I'm not going to argue with this gentleman simply because, as he said, I am not what I'm supposed to be, and that's the end of it. In other words, he has nothing to say to me. Basically, I have nothing to say to him.
Let him refute it.
And I did not interrupt him, and I would appreciate it if he didn't interrupt me. Let each person have his say. I think that most polls that have been conducted in this country by Americans, by the Gallup Institution, have shown that the vast majority of Soviets have a positive attitude towards Americans and towards the United States. So that would contradict what this gentleman is saying about the crass anti-Soviet, anti-American propaganda that we put on television and so on. What I said is, I don't feel we're balanced enough, but I certainly don't feel that we try to instill hatred towards America or Americans. On the contrary, in that sense, I have my colors nailed to the flag. I've made it quite clear that I want to work for understanding between the two countries. Now, if you don't want to consider me as a journalist, I can live with that, but I will keep on doing what I've done, and that is to try to help Americans understand my country, help Soviets understand America, instead of trying to divide them and to spew out hatred. I don't think that that's what we should be doing, that's all, regardless of who we are, journalists or anyone else.
All right, Mr. Posner. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce you to Jeff Cohen. He is with an organization called Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. It's a media watchdog group, a national one. His, I would say, opinion of this matter differs significantly from that of Mr. Carlson's. Jeff.
Yeah, I think that it's an example of what's wrong in the relations between the two countries that we have to attack Mr. Posner on whether he's a journalist or not. Having seen some of his work, he's a journalist. We may not agree with what he says, but he's a journalist. What I think is significant is that because of the mobilization of the peace movement, Americans can watch what the Soviets are watching on their TV on the Discovery Channel, a cable channel. And it's instructive to cut through the media. We can watch it directly and we can make up our own minds. And I think, I don't know if Mr. Carlson has been to the Soviet Union, but many of us in the room have. And I just don't find this animosity toward Americans when I walk the streets of the Soviet Union.
Mr. Posner, I also have a quick question here from a member of our studio audience.
Yeah, well, would the Soviets allow a show like this to be seen over there? I mean, it's pretty, you know, against the Soviets, not so much against the Russian people, but it's a openness that we be able to see our country showing some spirit in itself to defend itself after coming back. Would they show something like that?
I'm sorry, could someone recapitulate that question for me? I didn't quite get it.
The way I understand it, I think he wants to know if you will show or would show a presentation or a program like America or America in the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I'd like to say that we have officially requested to buy America. We wanted to show it in this country. ABC refused to sell it to us as of today. Personally, I'm against showing America in this country because I think that if it was shown on television here, it would lead to very strong anti-American sentiment. I think that the people would feel so insulted by what they're seeing that they would become, by virtue of that, very anti-American. That is why I don't want America shown on Soviet television. However, I know that officially Soviet television has proposed to buy America to show here. So far, it has not been able to get it.
All right. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue. Stay with us. Town Meeting Special Edition. We will return. Welcome back to Town Meeting. Again, we've got on the line Vladimir Posner in the Soviet Union. You had a question, ma'am.
Yeah, I feel a sense of growing fear when I come out of 14 hours of this program, Mr. Posner, and I feel that I'd like to imagine or hope that between the Soviet Union and the United States that artists could begin to visualize what it's going to be like, and I'm saying what it is going to be like to be getting rid of nuclear weapons and showing us films of that. Mr. Posner, do you feel that there are Soviet film crews who can come here and maybe show what it would be like to be a Soviet family coming to Nevada to work as some of the first people who work on verification teams, or the idea of Americans and Soviet citizens taking apart first-strike nuclear weapons, literally dismantling them, physically dismantling them. Is this something that artists in your country are being encouraged to do?
In about a month's time, there's going to be a large Soviet delegation of movie people basically visiting the United States to talk with Americans about one very important issue, and that is how we've both created the face of the enemy in the movies, in the film industry, how we, over the past 60 years, have created a certain image of Americans, and how America has created a certain image of us. And I don't think that we can get down to dismantling weapons until we cease to fear each other, until we see each other as human beings with human faces. We have managed, one side more, one side less, to dehumanize the other side. And I think that before we can actually talk about dismantling weapons, we have to be able to talk to each other like human beings. Yes, we're encouraged to do that. Yes, that's what new thinking is all about. And in my opinion, if we don't learn to do that, then I don't think we have a future on this earth of ours.
Let's get to one of our viewers who's on the phone trying to get involved here. Go ahead, you're on Town Meeting.
Yes, thank you. I just would like to quote that fiction, fantasy, is not the right word for the show Amerika. I would look at it more like a warning. It's not even propaganda. It is a simple truth. We just have to look at Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Berlin, Afghanistan. And let me tell you that once they are in there, you're not going to get them out.
Thank you to the caller. Go ahead, another caller. We want to get some people at home involved. Go ahead, you're on Town Meeting. The other caller. Is a caller there or not? All right, Jeff, you wanted to react.
Yeah. I just, in terms of like ABC as a network, what they've given us is two visions of the future. With The Day After, it was a vision of nuclear holocaust. That was our future. Now they've given us a vision of the future of a Soviet conquest. I think what, and it gets to what the last questioner said, when might ABC, do they have the imagination to give us a vision of the future where the two superpowers can actually sit down and begin dismantling weapons? Because I think we have to imagine that future or we'll never get to it. And it would be responsible to see that vision.
Go ahead, Mr. Cross.
In the interests of taking up Mr. Posner on his offer and trying to see each other's faces and interact as much as we can personally, Mr. Posner, you might be aware that recently the Discovery Channel, cable television channel, showed a week's worth of Soviet television. How do you think it could be arranged for Soviet citizens to see a week's worth of American television programming, uncut, uncensored, directly into the homes of the people so they can see our people face to face?
Mr. Posner?
Yeah, I was waiting for the applause to go down. Yes, I think it would be a very good idea. I don't know which American television we take because in this case, would we go to ABC or would it be CNN or would it be something else? And also it would have to be very local, like Discovery, because of the structure. It's, in our country, which you're probably not aware of, it's very different from yours. If we put something on National Channel 1, it means 150 million people are going to see it. And that's not the case with Discovery. But I absolutely believe that there should be more of this open, direct broadcasting without any editing, not specially made for U.S. consumption or for Soviet consumption, just television the way it's seen in the country. And I think that would be a very good thing indeed. Thanks to America, incidentally, the America series, that is why Discovery took Soviet television. So in that sense, I have to say thank you to ABC. Otherwise, you wouldn't be seeing it. But I certainly think we should have some American television on Soviet channels, and I think it would be a good thing to do it on a regular basis for both sides.
All right, Mr. Posner, let me ask you, how do we get this off the ground? If you're looking for a local station to begin just broadcasting into the Soviet Union, I'm sure KOMO would be happy to oblige. Maybe this is something that we should pursue.
I think it is something that is probably being spoken about right now. As you may or may not know, I am not in management. It's not one of my decisions to make. I'm simply saying that I think it would be a good idea to have some exchanges of American television and Soviet television.
All right, if that's what you think, what do the people in charge think? Are they receptive to this idea, or are you...
I think they are more and more receptive to it, and obviously the fact that Discovery is taking Soviet television, I mean, you don't have to be a clairvoyant or a genius to think that someone's going to say, how's about some reciprocity? Obviously they had that in mind, and I would not be surprised to see some American television on Soviet channels in the not-too-distant future.
Hi, I'd like to address the gentleman who's on the Sister City Committee. How can Seattle, as a city government, condone and have a relationship with Tashkent when they have tens of thousands of Afghan children there being indoctrinated by the Soviet government? Why do we have relations with them, and why don't we question and make it an issue with them?
First, you should understand that the Seattle-Tashkent Sister City relationship is not the city government of Seattle in operation. This is a entity, a committee of citizens of Seattle who are trying to build bridges to the Soviet Union and tear down the walls. And as we have made friends in the Soviet Union, these kinds of questions are being raised. I don't want to accept what you say about 10,000 Soviet or Afghan children in Tashkent. I think you're factually wrong. But serious questions are being raised with the friends that are being made. And rather than dealing with these people as enemies, we're making friends, and we're talking about some common enemies between our two countries. The enemy of poverty, the enemy of terrorism in the world, the enemy of drug abuse. We have a lot of common enemies, and we're starting to find that they see those as common enemies too. And it's through efforts like this that we think ultimately the bridges are going to be built.
All right, give us 2 minutes. We'll give you another 10. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I have a short comment to make. We talk about a fear of a Soviet invasion of the United States, but I wonder how many American people know that the United States actually sent troops to the Soviet Union in 1918, along with the British and the Japanese, to try to topple that government.
Yes, Mr. Posner, I've been fascinated hearing you speak here in the United States, and wondered, I just learned here in the audience that you're from Brooklyn, you're from the United States, and that you went back to the Soviet Union with your family. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, only that's not true. Number one, I'm not from Brooklyn. I was born in Paris, which, as far as I know, is not in Brooklyn. There is a Paris in Texas, I guess. Born in Paris, France, and I lived in the United States in Manhattan with my parents between the years of 1940 and 1952. I was never an American citizen. My parents were not American citizens. My father was a Soviet citizen. So there seems to be a little bit of mythology. I simply lived in the States with my parents and went to school there for 9 years.
You know, Mr. Posner, even if you were from Brooklyn, I don't think we could find fault with you for denying that you were from there. Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to ask Mr. Posner, excuse me, when was the last time that he made any kind of statements or asked any questions or anything which were critical of his government?
I'd be delighted to answer that question. When I was in the United States last May, I think it was, on the Donahue show, I stated that I thought jamming was counterproductive. I also stated that I felt that anyone who wanted to leave the country should be able to do so. I think you will agree that that view is not exactly the popular government view. I do not wear two hats or two suits, and I speak my mind. So I hope that answers your question.
Mr. Posner and Mr. Cohen would have us believe that if we only could have bridges for peace and people-to-people exchanges, that world relations would be better. In a totalitarian state, I would question what kind of ability any citizen has to influence their government, first of all. And second of all, you have many people in this audience, Latvians, Jews, Poles, Estonians, Baltic peoples altogether, who have those direct people-to-people connections already, yet they are not able to even get together with their family members in the Soviet Union. So I find it very hard to believe that this would in fact better relations.
Well, let me answer. I think that besides people-to-people exchanges, what we also need to do is we've got to get our American government to follow the lead of the Soviet Union and quit testing nuclear weapons. We've tested 25 since they quit testing them August 1985. And if you stop testing nuclear weapons, that's a beginning to stopping the arms race. There's other ways we can make negotiated stoppages to the arms race. That's what we need to do, not just people-to-people cultural exchanges.
Mr. Posner, let me get you, if you would like, to respond to that lady's question.
Well, what the lady is saying is something I've heard many times before, but the question is simply, are we going to talk to each other or are we not? Are we going to work up the prejudices and the hatreds we have, or are we going to try to bring them down?
But her point is, what good is it going to do because the Soviet people are incapable of influencing the Soviet government?
Well, that's what she says, but the fact of the matter is she doesn't know. And I would add to that, let's try to establish normal relations and see what happens. We've seen what happens up to now, and what's happened up to now looks very bad, and I think we could look into the future when we'll have the Big Bang, and that'll be it. I think we should try something else. And if you look at what's happening in the Soviet Union today, I think you'll see a lot of influencing by the people of the government. Don't make those statements without really knowing what you're talking about. That, too, is dangerous.
I agree with you, Mr. Posner. I feel that the world situation in terms of the ecology demands that everyone look at the situation in terms of not us against them. It's very important that we all try to work together. We have enough fear and hatred in the world as it is.
Mr. Posner, we are just about out of time. And let me go to you first here. Ask you if you would give us your thoughts as to what you think the legacy of America might be.
Well,
the legacy of America, I'm sorry, the legacy of America, the television program. So
yeah, I'm sorry, my voice is going on.
I'll tell you
want to ask someone else a question because I'm having a problem with my voice.
All right, we'll go to Jeff first and we'll come back to you. The legacy.
I think the legacy is, it's an issue we haven't raised all day today, that the ratings have been falling since this thing began on Sunday night. Part of the reason people are tuning out is because perhaps it's too tedious and too long. But I think another reason may be that people are just bored with the idea of this Cold War scenario of the commie invader film. And maybe people have outgrown this kind of Cold War good guys and bad guys. The 50-foot Russians and the 10-foot, you know, the 3-foot naive Americans who are wimpy.
You think that's what the legacy of America is going to be?
I think that a lot of people have outgrown this. TV critics have bashed this on political grounds. The American people have largely tuned out. Probably more people were watching Flashdance tonight.
All right. Mr. Posner, how about you? Your concept of what the legacy of this show might be?
My hope is that America represents the high point or the low point, depending on how you look at it, in the relationship. I think that perhaps it has stimulated enough debate, brought up enough issues to make it clear that this is not the type of thing we should be doing, that this is a dead end, and I mean dead with capitals. So perhaps the legacy of America will be a change for the better in the sense of a realization of the importance of seeing each other as human beings rather than stereotypes. In that sense, I'm more optimistic.
All right. Mr. Carlson, what about you? What do you think the legacy of this show could be or would be?
Again, I guess disagree with Jeff. I think he's reading too much politics into it. If people were tuning out America, I think it had something to do with the fact that it was indeed tedious and that Dallas and Miami Vice were on competing networks. But to sum it all up, if the nation remains strong and the people's spirit remains strong as a result of this program, then the series succeeded masterfully.
All right. I want to thank our gratitude to the studio audience here for your indulgence and your patience in staying with us for all these times. Our thanks to Mr. Cohen and Mr. Carlson and Mr. Posner. Let's give everyone a warm... It has been one of those weeks. Few closing notes. History shows us that freedom and liberty have always been impeded by ignorance and superstition, by intolerance and fear. There are those who feared what broadcasting the program America might do. They're concerned that the U.S. population would be subliminally led into a frenzy of anti-Soviet sentiment, or on the other side of the coin, be misled into seeing a Soviet occupation as being rather benign. Both factions felt the program dangerous in some way, yet freedom is itself dangerous. It is dangerous to give people control, to allow them choice, to secure an individual's ability to speak freely and in disagreement. Those freedoms were enjoyed here this evening. They're catalyst, a program extreme in nature and volatile in concept. Whether you enjoyed the 14.5 hours of America should have no bearing on the provocative issues it raised and the freedom to discuss them openly for as long as you'd like. As for us, we are out of time this evening. Must say goodnight. Want to thank you for watching. Thanks for being with us. Take care and have a good week.
Accommodations for guests on town meeting provided by the Stouffer Madison Hotel.